This is Brian, ScreenFiles.com in review. Well, I'm looking at today's 2020's The Empty Man. And if you're me, you went into this movie with a little bit of trepidation because you've seen things like Slender Man and The Bye-Bye Man, and pretty much anything you have man after. And you realize those movies weren't that good. This is an exception. It has problems, quite a few in fact, but it's a much better movie than those I mentioned just a moment ago. What makes this movie work so well, first off, James Badge Dale is an underrated actor. He appears, and I want to say, probably 85 to 90% of this movie, maybe 80, 85. And he is really good. He has a way of acting where he vanishes into the character. It's almost the opposite of typical actors. He's not a Tom Cruise type person. He's more of a character actor. He is great in this movie. It's also a very beautiful, atmospheric movie. Very cinematic, and it's just well worth watching. Though as I said, there are problems. First off, this movie is 2 hours and 17 minutes long. I'm going to repeat that. 2 hours and 17 minutes. There's no reason this movie should be 2 hours and 17 minutes. And in fact, what makes that worse, there's an epilogue that runs 23 minutes and change. You don't need that. It established a background of what's going on, but to be honest, it's so unnecessary to the movie. It's well shot, it's well done, you didn't need to see it. You see none of those characters in the epilogue for the bulk of the movie. It didn't need to happen. I know oftentimes I will say, show, don't tell. And 9/10 of the time, that's the direction I think a director should go in. Though in this instance, he should have told, not shown. Because it's not that it's bad, it really isn't. But this movie should not be 2 hours and 17 minutes. The material doesn't warrant it. And another problem is, it's actually two movies crammed together. In the sense that the epilogue I mentioned earlier revolved around a sort of possession type scenario. And when it carries into the future, closer to present day, we have an entity killing young people. That is so disconnected to the bulk of this story. It's, as I said, it's like two different movies crammed together. The part where you have the entity that kills young people is very much like Bloody Mary and Candyman, in that type of area. Though the thing is, it doesn't fit the other story, which involves something called a tulpa. According to Wikipedia, a tulpa is a supernatural or a mentally created being, which is to say, with the powers of the mind, or via a supernatural vector, you create an actualized person called a tulpa. The part of the movie that revolves around a tulpa does not at all mesh with the part of the movie that revolves around the killing of children. And in fact, watching it, I couldn't find a reason why the children were being killed. When I say children, I should say young adults. They were teenagers. Actually played by teenagers, which is rare. In any case, I couldn't find a reason why the young people were being killed. You don't know who did it, but more importantly, you don't know why it's happening. It's a real discordant clash of genres. If this movie had been exclusively about this ritual young people did to summon this being, let's call it the Empty Man, then it would have been something we've seen before, no doubt. But it also would have been cohesive. Conversely, if it were about the summoning of this tulpa and the repercussions that would come from it, that would be interesting too. But it tries to have its cake and eat it too. And as a result, it's a bit of a mess. Though, keep in mind, as I said, James Badge Dale holds this movie together like human superglue. He makes this work when it probably wouldn't under other actors. And he brings a cohesiveness to it. And in fact, if I didn't think about it after the fact, I probably wouldn't have noticed it for longer, but it kept bothering me. And so I just realized it doesn't mesh very well. And another thing is, the movie reminds me in some ways of Tenet, in that its underlying thesis isn't faithfully followed by its director. In a sense that, who also wrote it, by the way. His last name is Pryor. I don't recall the first name off the top of my head. I want to say Richard Pryor, but probably not. The movie establishes that the tulpa is created to channel these evil forces from beyond, which is very much in the vein of H.P. Lovecraft, actually, which is interesting. The Lovecraftian angle was definitely not expected. But, as I said, if you would have just took that, it would have worked much better. If you just took the Bloody Mary Candyman angle, it would have worked much better. To combine those two elements was just odd. Though another problem with that is that I mentioned earlier that the movie doesn't follow its own rules in regard to its own antagonist, the tulpa. And that happens because a tulpa is created of a character, and I'm not going to tell you who. But the movie doesn't quite explain how it works. As I understand it, a tulpa isn't like a doppelganger. And in fact, it's more analogous to the Jewish golem, which is to say, it's a being created from, in this instance, either mental energies or supernatural energies, designed to have a particular purpose. It's not a copy of another person. It's not like a positive and negative duplicate were to meet and it would explode or whatever. It's not that. And the movie kind of messes with the idea in ways that don't make sense. Now keep in mind, if the movie had somehow established the tulpa was capable of certain things, then I could roll with it. But it only gives you the minimal amount of information about what it is. And it doesn't give you any real knowledge of its capabilities, which makes what happens oftentimes really confusing and just not great. But that being said, it's a generally good movie, and it's really taut and well done at times, though I wish it had been a little more cohesive and not quite so meandering. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in a review. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.